I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Sedona with my 26-year-old, and I'm taking all our money with me. That's what the text said. It came in at 2:03 a.m. local time. I had just finished a 13-hour shift offshore in the North Atlantic, 40 miles off the coast of Nova Scotia. It was minus 12 degrees outside, the steel beneath my boots still humming from the compressors. My name is Caleb Morgan. I'm 51 years old, and for nearly 3 decades, I've worked oil rigs from Siberia to the Gulf of Mexico. I've missed birthdays, anniversaries, and funerals, all in exchange for steady pay, hard-earned respect, and what I thought was a future I was building back home. I'd been married to Melissa for 19 years. We'd met in a hardware store in Grand Junction, Colorado, where she used to work behind the paint counter, making fun of guys who couldn't pick the right shade of white. I was already 10 years into the oil life. She said she loved my steadiness. I loved her energy. I never saw this coming. Not like this. The second message hit harder. It was a screenshot of our joint savings account showing a balance of $0.36, where just 2 weeks ago there had been over $158,000. She'd even added a little emoji, a kiss, like it was something cheeky, lighthearted. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I just sat on the edge of my narrow bunk, stared at the flickering overhead bulb, and typed 4 words. Sure, good luck, Mel. Then I shut off my phone and walked to the showers. The next day, the crew noticed something was off. Eli, my second in command, kept glancing over during our pre-drill safety checks, but no one said a word. Out here, you don't pry into another man's silence unless he asks for help. At lunch, I opened my laptop. Melissa had already filed for divorce. Her lawyer, Carl Dempsey. I remembered him. He did high-asset divorces and had a billboard off the I-70 freeway with a slogan that read, "It's not revenge. It's just good business." Their claim: I had abandoned the marriage. Too many months abroad. Too much income disparity. She was seeking ongoing support and full possession of our house, my house, the one I'd bought cash before we married. She said her emotional support partner, a man named Troy, was already staying there to help her through the transition. That line stuck with me for a while. That night, I opened a secure email only one other person on this planet knew existed. My cousin Lucas, a quiet accountant in Austin who handled my offshore declarations. The subject line was simple. Activate Protocol Winterfall. That was our code. No questions, no explanations. 3 minutes later, he replied, already in motion. Do not reply. Don't engage until you're back stateside. There were 11 days left in my rotation. 11 more days of bitter wind steel under my feet and pretending nothing had happened. I could have asked for emergency leave. The guys would have understood. But what would that fix? Better to keep working, draw the paycheck. Stick to the schedule, keep my mind on measurable things. Pressure, flow rate, equipment, reliability. Because nothing about Melissa felt measurable anymore. That night after shutdown, Wilson, our rig manager, stopped by. Everything stable, he asked. He wasn't talking about equipment. I nodded once. Under control. It was. And more than Melissa would ever know. We met 19 years ago. She was 32, I was 33. I was back from 3 months in Algeria helping a buddy restock his hardware store. Melissa was on her 3rd job in 2 years, always saying she just hadn't found her thing yet. We got married less than a year later. Fast, but we thought it made sense. I already owned my house. A 1-story ranch with a deep porch and a detached workshop. I had 0 debt, a growing offshore career, and enough investments from a lucky early stake in a startup rig operator. She said she loved how I made her feel safe. And maybe that was the first warning sign. At first it worked. The offshore schedule was rough, but the pay incredible. 6 months on, 6 months off. We agreed she'd manage the home. I'd bring the money. We'd meet in the middle. It stayed that way for a long time. Until it didn't. Around year 12, things started to crack. Small things. She complained I was missing holidays. Asked why I needed to keep working rigs so far away when there were closer options. Wondered why other husbands were always home for dinner parties. I said the money was better out there. She said she was lonely. I told her we were building something. She didn't respond. 3 years ago, I noticed the phone calls got shorter. Photos stopped. She stopped saying I miss you at the end of our video chats. Last Christmas, I came home and the entire house had been redecorated, new furniture, new paint, even the dog bowl was different. When I asked about it, she just shrugged. You needed change, she said. I didn't ask what kind of change she meant. 2 months ago, I saw transfers from our account going to a new credit union I didn't recognize. She said it was for home repairs, something about the roof. I checked, no roofing work. But there was a black Audi parked outside I'd never seen. When I asked, she said it was a contractor's car. I should have trusted my gut, but instead I trusted my wife. 3 days ago, our neighbor Chuck texted me a photo. A moving truck, parked in front of my house. Figured you should know. No commentary. I didn't reply, didn't ask questions. Just stared at that image, my driveway, my trees, my porch, and waited. Because sometimes the truth arrives without being invited. I finished my shift the next day, walked back to my bunk, turned on the satellite phone. Lucas called almost immediately. You sitting down, just tell me. She's been planning this for a while. At least 15 months. Slow transfers to an account in her maiden name. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Then larger moves in the last 60 days. How much? He didn't pause. Just under 231,000. That was nearly 70 grand more than I knew we had. He continued. She also changed your beneficiary on your life insurance 6 months ago. And she took out a $50,000 equity line against the house. Forged your signature. I closed my eyes, felt the steel hum beneath the floor. Felt nothing else. Who's the guy? Troy, 26. Former personal trainer. No stable income. History of short-term relationships with older women. And Lucas's voice went quiet. There are credit card charges for 2 one-way tickets to Sedona, booked for this Friday. That was 3 days from now. She wasn't just leaving me. She was trying to vanish with everything before I even set foot back on land. I sat in the dark. Didn't speak. Didn't move. Just watched as almost 20 years of memory rearranged themselves. Phone calls outside, sudden gym habits, short answers, new passwords, forgotten birthdays. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. It was the planning. The calm, calculated erosion of everything I thought was ours. Then something shifted. The hurt solidified, became steel. I opened my locker, pulled out my laptop, and logged into the holding account Lucas and I set up 8 years ago after I watched a colleague lose everything in a messy divorce. Winterfall Trust. Named after my grandmother's farm and the creek that ran through it. Account balance, $1.9 million. Legal. Declared on taxes. Structured to exclude marital claim. I sent one email to my lawyer in Austin. Proceed. Operation Cold Return. Then I walked to the mess hall. And for the first time in 3 days, I felt hungry. I landed in Austin just before midnight, 36 hours after stepping off the platform. Lucas was waiting for me at the airport. He handed me a burner phone, a backpack with documents, and a sealed envelope marked for Thomas only. That was Thomas Klein, my lawyer. Lucas looked me in the eye. Melissa's been calling your regular number non-stop for the last day and a half. Probably realized the money froze. I nodded. Let her wonder. The money she took had triggered a standard alert at the bank. Unusual transfer pattern. Sudden withdrawals. Foreign access conflict. They locked the funds pending verification. She thought I was still offshore for another week. She didn't know I was already on the ground moving quietly. Only 3 people did: Lucas, Thomas, and now Chuck, my neighbor back in Grand Junction. As Lucas drove me to Thomas's office, he slid me a tablet. Messages from Melissa's phone. I used your old iCloud password, he explained. She never changed it when she upgraded. Everything's syncing to your cloud. The screen lit up with a thread of messages between Melissa and someone labeled simply T. I scrolled through their plans, moving into a rental in Sedona, registering under aliases, laughing about me working oil while they spent it like wine. But it was one message, one exchange that cut deeper than all the rest. Melissa, the bank froze the money. They're saying Caleb has to approve it in person. What do I do? T. Tell him there's an emergency. Use the mom thing again. You're still his wife. Make him trust you one more time. Melissa, he's not answering. T. Then it's time to look at Plan B. Melissa, I don't like Plan B. T. He works a dangerous job for a reason. Accidents happen. That was it. No emoji. No laughing tone. Just a line. Accidents happen. Thomas was waiting when we arrived. He'd already filed an emergency motion to freeze all joint marital assets, reported the forged home equity loan, and prepped the divorce counterfiling with fraud and conspiracy included. He poured me a cup of black coffee. She's also filed a domestic violence claim against you, he said. I stared at him. I've been 4,000 miles offshore for 7 weeks. Doesn't matter, Thomas said. It's a common tactic. It buys her temporary leverage, a restraining order, control of the house, maybe even emergency support. She's hoping you don't contest it fast enough. I didn't say anything. Just watch the steam rise from the coffee. She filed it yesterday, he added. And she's asking for an emergency hearing. Tomorrow morning. But Thomas wasn't just any lawyer. He was methodical. He pulled out a packet of papers and laid them across the desk one by one. My security badge data confirming I'd never left the offshore platform for 51 straight days. Passport records showing my last entry and exit from the U.S. Satellite phone logs showing every call between Melissa and me for the past 12 months, all civil, no arguments, no threats. And lastly, the text message thread from her iCloud backup. Plan B included. This isn't just a false claim, Thomas said. This is perjury. And depending on how the court reads those texts, possible conspiracy to defraud or worse. I signed everything. Quietly, deliberately. No shaking hands. No rage. Just focus. That night, I stayed at Lucas's apartment above his garage. I didn't sleep much, didn't need to. At 3:00 a.m., I logged into the security camera feed I'd installed in the Grand Junction house 3 years ago. Melissa had never bothered to disable it. Or maybe she thought I couldn't access it from out of the country. She was wrong. The stream opened to Troy shirtless lounging on my leather couch. He was drinking from my whiskey collection. Wearing my old college hoodie, I watched as Melissa walked into frame. She looked anxious. Kept pacing. He barely looked up. It was my house. My couch. My life quietly emptied of me. The next morning we were in court. Melissa was already seated with her attorney, a young man in a too-tight suit who clearly didn't expect opposition. She looked up when I walked in. Her face blanched. She wasn't expecting me. Thomas spoke first, calm and precise. He laid out my alibi, the offshore records, the flight logs, the digital stamps, and the fact that she had submitted a false sworn statement. The judge asked if we had more. Thomas presented the text messages. When the judge read the line about accidents happen, she paused, took off her glasses, and looked directly at Melissa. Mrs. Morgan, she said, are you aware that attempting to manipulate a life insurance policy under false circumstances is not only unethical, but potentially criminal? Melissa tried to speak. Her lawyer whispered something. She nodded. I misunderstood, she mumbled. It wasn't serious. The judge didn't smile. She revoked the domestic violence claim on the spot, declared it baseless, lifted the temporary order barring me from my home, and then she granted an emergency freeze on all Melissa's personal accounts and the LLC she had registered 2 months ago, the one she funneled money into using the forged equity loan. After court, I turned to Thomas. I want to go home. He looked hesitant. You sure that's smart? I'm not going to talk to her. I just want to see it for myself. I'll stay across the street. Chuck's place. He nodded. By 5:00 p.m., I was in Grand Junction. Chuck was waiting at the door. Retired petroleum engineer. 30 years in the field. No questions asked. She's got no clue you're watching, he said as he handed me a hot coffee. I looked out from his front window. The house was alive, lights on, movement inside. 2 trucks had come and gone that day. Chuck had been watching. Furniture. Electronics. Art. Stuff you can't replace, he said, but no sign of slowing down. They're planning one more trip tomorrow. Big truck coming. I nodded. Anything else? He hesitated. Someone came by yesterday, looked like a real estate agent, took photos, clipboard, smiled a lot. I blinked. She's trying to sell the house. Looks that way. I texted Thomas. He confirmed it 2 hours later, a forged listing agreement. My signature copied from a tax form she found in the drawer. The house was priced 20% under market value. Quick sale. Quiet escape. She wasn't just stealing what I had. She was trying to erase any trace of me before I could get back. I didn't sleep that night. At 4:30 a.m., I watched the feed again. Troy packing boxes. Melissa folding clothes into suitcases. One bag had my initials still on the side. By sunrise, I was sitting in Chuck's kitchen suit, pressed paperwork ready. Thomas had arranged everything. At 8:50 a.m., a large white moving truck pulled into my driveway. 2 men got out. Melissa opened the door. At 8:57, an unmarked sheriff vehicle parked right behind the truck. 2 officers got out, and 1 court officer. They walked up the steps. Melissa answered the door. She smiled, until she saw the uniforms. And then, until she saw me stepping into view from across the street, she froze. "Troy," she whispered. He came to the door confused. Then he saw the badges, the paperwork, and me. His expression collapsed into something like fear. The officers handed them both documents. Emergency restraining order. Civil suit for financial fraud. Motion to nullify the home sale. Divorce summons citing malice and criminal intent. Melissa tried to speak. I raised a hand, quietly. "You've got 30 minutes, the court officer said. "Clothes and toiletries only. Everything else is staying under court protection." They walked inside. I stood outside, still, calm. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for the truth to finally stand up in the daylight. They had 30 minutes. That's what the deputy told them. "Clothing and toiletries only," he repeated. "Everything else is now protected under court order pending inventory." Melissa didn't argue. Troy, on the other hand, puffed his chest, tried to sound tough. "You can't do this," he snapped at the officer. "We have rights." The officer didn't flinch. "You had time. You chose fraud." Melissa turned to me, her voice trembling. "Caleb, please. This is a misunderstanding." I said nothing. Just stood by the mailbox and watched the two of them walk back inside past the porch I rebuilt with my own hands into a home that no longer felt like mine. While they packed, I called Thomas to update him. "They've been served. She saw me." Thomas exhaled through the phone. "Then let's move quickly. I've confirmed the forged real estate listing. We're filing to void the agreement entirely." He paused. "There's more, Caleb." He always said that when something bad was coming. "What?" "Chuck sent us some photos. They were taken earlier this week. A moving truck, loaded with family items, not just furniture." He sent them to my phone. My grandfather's desk. The old cedar chest my mother gave us. A hand-carved dresser from my great-uncle's cabin. She wasn't just moving. She was clearing me out past and present, trying to erase my bloodline from that house like I never existed. By the time the deputies escorted them off the property, Melissa wouldn't look at me. Troy shot me one final glare, trying to preserve whatever pride he had left. I didn't return it. He wasn't worth the energy. As they drove off in the black SUV, Troy at the wheel, Melissa in the passenger seat, the only thing I felt was a slow, steady release of tension in my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just clarity and silence. 3 weeks later, we were in court again. Melissa showed up alone. Troy had vanished 2 days after being served. He'd drained the last of her separate savings, took some jewelry, and ghosted her. Lucas had warned me. He'd found the pattern: 3 prior relationships, all with financially stable women over 40. All ending within 18 months. All ending with him disappearing. But Melissa didn't know that when she walked in. And now she had no lawyer either. She sat across from me, head down, visibly thinner. Thomas stood beside me, firm and professional. The judge reviewed the evidence again, this time more thoroughly. First, the bank records. Over $230,000 moved in under a year. Multiple false descriptions for transfers labeled as repairs donations, even fabricated investment accounts. Then the forged loan documents. Melissa had used my signature to secure a $50,000 equity line against the house. That money went straight into an LLC, a shell company Troy had registered in his name. Then came the iCloud messages. And finally, the attempted sale of the house, forged listing agreement, illegal signature priced below market, and clearly meant to disappear before I got back. The judge didn't rush. She flipped through each page carefully. And then she looked up. "In 30 years on this bench," she said, "I've rarely seen such clear, deliberate malice in a marriage." She turned to Melissa, who was now visibly shaking. "Mrs. Morgan, you not only attempted to defraud your husband, but you did so with a consistency that demonstrates intent over time, not impulse. You forged documents. You concealed assets. You filed false claims to gain leverage." Melissa opened her mouth, but the judge raised a hand. "Enough. You will not speak unless I ask a question." The courtroom was silent. She turned to Thomas. "Mr. Klein, what is your client's request?" Thomas stepped forward. "We're requesting full return of diverted assets, sole ownership of the house restored to Mr. Morgan, denial of all spousal support, and a formal referral to the district attorney for investigation into the forgery and fraud." The judge nodded. "All granted." Then she added something I didn't expect. "Mr. Morgan, for the record, while your use of a separate trust might raise questions, in some contexts, your records show you paid all taxes appropriately and supported the household fully. The trust appears to be protection, not evasion. She signed the ruling. That was it. It was over. Outside the courtroom, Melissa tried to approach me. I stepped aside. There was nothing left to say. Nothing worth revisiting. She didn't cry. She just looked hollow, as if the thing she thought she'd own me the house the life had slipped through her fingers like sand. And it had. Because it was never hers to begin with. 6 months passed. I sold the house. Chuck helped me box what little remained. Most of the furniture was gone. But the heirlooms, the photos, the desk, those came with me. To Montana, where I owned 40 acres of pine forest and a cabin near Flathead Lake. Melissa had never known about it. Winterfall Trust had purchased it years ago quietly as part of my long-term exit strategy. It was always meant to be the end of the road, a place where I'd one day stop moving, stop sacrificing time, stop missing birthdays. I filed for early retirement. After 28 years in oil, I'd had enough. I had what I needed. A steady investment return. Royalties from a gas well I co-owned in Arkansas. And peace. Real unshakable peace. Melissa. She pleaded guilty to misdemeanor forgery as part of a deal. No jail time, just probation and restitution payments she'll never be able to complete. Last I heard, she moved in with her sister in Albuquerque. Troy. He's already living with another woman, a divorced orthopedic surgeon in Tucson. Lucas found the photos. New city, same Audi, same smile. Some people don't change. But I had. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, I received a manila envelope from Thomas. Inside was the final dissolution report for Winterfall Trust. The last step in closing that chapter. All assets transferred. All debts paid. All filings done. I held the paper in my hand. It felt light. Just ink and signature. But somehow heavier than anything I'd ever carried on a rig. That evening, I sat on the porch swing I'd built myself, bourbon in hand, watching the sun dip behind the pines. For the first time in decades, I wasn't someone's provider. Wasn't someone's backup plan. I was just a man. With scars, yes. But whole again. The phone rang. A new number. A company in Alberta offering a part-time consulting role. High pay. Minimal travel. Just wisdom passed down. I smiled. I'll think about it, I said. And I would. But not tonight. Tonight wasn't for planning. Tonight was for sitting still in the quiet I'd earned. The thing about silence is it doesn't just arrive. You have to earn it. You have to walk through storms of noise, arguments, betrayals, lawyers, courtroom echoes, and come out the other side willing to let it settle. That's where I found myself. Sitting in my cabin just outside Flathead Lake, the trees swaying the wind, speaking its own slow language. No calls, no demands, no expectations, just space, and the chance to breathe. I'd been here for about 6 months now. The cabin had become home in ways my old house in Grand Junction never truly was. I'd poured myself into this place not just with money, but with time. Refinished the floors, rewired the porch lights, built the swing I now sat on every morning with a cup of coffee and every evening with a glass of bourbon. I'd reclaimed something I hadn't realized I'd lost over the years. Not money, not trust, but rhythm. The natural pace of a life no longer built around someone else's comfort. Occasionally, Lucas would check in. He'd always start with "still quiet out there," like he couldn't quite believe I'd actually stepped away. He knew me best, knew how long I'd chased stability offshore, trading time for security presence for income. "You ever regret not pulling out sooner?" he asked one night on a call. I didn't need time to answer. "No," I said. "I only regret thinking I needed to prove I was enough for someone who never saw me in the first place." He didn't speak for a few seconds, then just said, "That'll preach." I still hadn't heard from Melissa. Not directly anyway. Thomas updated me once she'd missed her first restitution payment. Filed for an extension citing financial hardship. No surprise there. The house she and Troy had tried to buy in Sedona fell through when the bank flagged the frozen funds. The deposit was never returned. The realtor had since filed a civil complaint for breach of contract. Everything unraveled, piece by piece. And I had done nothing but step back and let the consequences land exactly where they were earned. One morning, Chuck called from Grand Junction. "Got a letter for you here. Forwarded from your old address. Handwritten." He paused. "It's from her." I told him to hold on to it. 3 days later, it arrived at my post office box in Kalispell. I opened it on the porch. No rush, no emotion. Inside 5 lines written on hotel stationery. I was wrong. I let something small become something unforgivable. Troy used me. But I chose to let him. You never deserved what I did. I hope someday you'll forgive me. That was it. No request. No explanation. Just 5 lines written too late. I didn't reply. I didn't burn it either. I folded the paper, slid it into the same folder that held the divorce decree, the final asset transfer, and the last tax return with both our names on it. Not out of sentiment, but because some things belong in the archive not as reminders of pain, but proof that I came through the fire without losing my shape. Later that week, I got a call from a natural gas startup out of Calgary. They wanted to fly me in to lead a 3-day workshop on offshore risk management. Said my name came up in a reference board from an old company I'd worked with in Norway. They offered good money, first-class flight, no strings. I asked for 24 hours. That night, I sat on the porch, watched the stars, and asked myself a simple question. What are you building now, Caleb? Because it's one thing to leave something behind. It's another to start something real in its place. The next morning, I called them back. Told them I'd do it on one condition. That I'd bring a junior consultant with me. A young woman named Samantha, a recent graduate from Montana Tech, who'd reached out after reading a post I made about life after the oil field. She reminded me of myself, only sharper, more adaptable. I wanted her to learn what no textbook could teach: how to stay grounded when everything around you spins. They agreed. It felt good to open a door for someone else, especially when I remembered how few were ever opened for me. The trip went well. Samantha picked up everything fast, asked smart questions, didn't overstep. At the end of the week, the company asked if I'd consider a longer-term mentorship role, 4 trips a year, 2 weeks each. Flexible. High autonomy. No pressure. I said I'd think about it. But not for money. For meaning. Because when you've spent years being someone else's foundation, sometimes the best thing you can do is help someone else build theirs without agenda, without control. Just trust. When I got home, a small package was waiting for me. No return address. Inside was a framed photo. Me, Melissa, and her sister at a lake in Wyoming, probably our 3rd year of marriage. Taped to the back was a note. I found this in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. I don't want to erase everything. Some of it was real, even if I didn't know how to keep it. I looked at it for a long time. Not out of nostalgia, but because there was a time when I would have believed it meant something. Now, it just meant she was starting to understand what loss actually feels like. And maybe that was enough. That night, I sat on the porch, turned off the lights, and listened to the wind pass through the trees. I wasn't angry, wasn't sad, just still. And I realized something. For all the pain, all the deception, all the noise, this place, this version of my life wasn't built in spite of what happened. It was built because of it. It's strange how the final moments of a story don't always come with fireworks. Sometimes they come quietly, the soft click of a door closing. The last envelope signed, the sound of your own breath as you exhale everything you didn't know you'd been holding. That's what it felt like the morning I signed the final documents. Divorce decree, asset clearances, trust dissolution. All the loose ends were tied. All the battles finally settled. I was no longer a husband, no longer an offshore workhorse, no longer the man trying to prove he could hold together something someone else had already let go of. I was just Caleb Morgan again. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The days were quieter now. No court dates, no legal filings, no emails from Thomas at odd hours. Just the rhythm of the woods, the occasional call from Chuck, the wind through the tall pines lining my property in Montana. I spent mornings restoring old tools I picked up from antique shops. Evenings building out the shed behind the cabin. Nothing fancy, just reclaimed wood and the steady ache of real labor. It reminded me of something I'd lost during all those years offshore. The feeling of building something where I owned every nail. I still checked in with Lucas. We didn't talk about Melissa anymore. There was nothing left to say. But every now and then, he'd mention something, an old contact who asked about me, a client who shared they'd followed the story in whispers across the oil network. Most folks still don't believe you kept that calm, Lucas said once. I shrugged. Staying calm isn't hard when you stop trying to change someone who made their choice. He was quiet for a second, then said, "You've changed." And I had. Not into someone new, but into someone honest with himself finally. One evening in early fall, I sat on the porch with a mug of strong coffee and the framed quote Thomas had given me the day we finalized the divorce. "The best revenge is living well." At the time, it felt like a polite version of burn everything down. Now, it felt different. It felt like truth. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for Melissa to call and say she was sorry again. I wasn't hoping Troy would fall into legal trouble or disappear into some scandal. I didn't need anything to happen, because my peace wasn't built on their failure. It was built on my choices, every slow, deliberate one, since that text message on the rig changed everything. A few weeks later, I got an email from Samantha, the young consultant I'd brought with me on the Calgary trip. Subject line: landed the job. She'd been hired full-time. They offered her a leadership development track thanks in part to my reference. Thanks for believing in me, she wrote. I still remember what you said that first night. We don't just carry knowledge. We carry mistakes. And how we handle them is what makes us useful. I think about that all the time. I smiled. Maybe that was what this was all for. Maybe what I went through wasn't just about survival. Maybe it was about becoming someone worth following. Chuck visited a month later. We grilled steaks, watched the trees shed their leaves, and drank cold beer on the porch swing I'd built. You ever think about dating again? He asked, grinning. I laughed. Only when I forget what courtrooms smell like. He shook his head. Come on, not every woman is Melissa. I know, I said. And I meant it. But the truth was, I wasn't looking to add anything to this piece. If something found me one day, quiet, steady, real, I'd be open. But I wasn't chasing anymore. I'd chased too long. Now I just walked forward. In December, I received one final envelope from Thomas. A letter from Melissa forwarded through legal. No manipulation this time. Just a note. I saw you on a panel about offshore safety. You looked healthier. Clearer. I wanted you to know I've taken a job. Retail. Not glamorous, but honest. I still wear the necklace you bought me in year 2. Not because I miss us, but because it reminds me of the one time I was sure I could have become better, and didn't. I hope your woods are quiet, and that your sleep comes easy. No signature. No ask for forgiveness. Just an echo of a past she could no longer reach. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with the others, and closed it, gently. On the 1-year anniversary of that text, the one that started it all, I hiked out to the ridgeline behind my property. From there, I could see the lake frozen around the edges, reflecting the early snow on the pines. I stood there a long time, thinking about the man I used to be. The man who would have begged her to stay. Who would have rushed home, tried to explain himself, tried to earn a kind of love that was never real in the first place. And I thought about the man I'd become. Still, focused, honest, and finally, free. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, typed out one final message to Thomas, Lucas, and Chuck, the 3 men who stood beside me when the ground fell out. Thank you, I'm good now. Don't need anything. Just wanted you to know I made it. That night I lit a fire. Not out of necessity, but out of comfort. Sat by it with a blanket across my lap, a book open on the armrest, and no urgency to do anything else. The storm was over. The winds had passed. And all that remained was the man who walked through it and never lost his center. Because when you've been to the bottom, when you've been stripped of everything you thought you had, and you're still standing, that's not just survival, that's strength. And sometimes, that's the only closure you ever need.